This is Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor. To open the week of July 21st, Thune discussed legislative successes 6 months into the second Trump administration, even as the pace of confirmation for the president's nominees was historically slow. The following material is protected by copyright.
Thank you. Mr. President, yesterday marked 6 months since President Trump took office. And today is the 200th day of the Republican majority here in the United States Senate. And in that time, the Trump administration and Senate Republicans have been hard at work executing the mandate we received from the American people last November. We already have a number of accomplishments on the list. We got started by sending the Laken-Riley Act to President Trump's desk during the first week in office to keep criminal illegal immigrants off our streets. President Trump signed the HALT Fentanyl Act last Wednesday, which permanently classifies fentanyl analogs as the deadly drugs that they are. On Friday, he signed the Genius Act, a landmark bill to bring digital assets into the mainstream and secure U.S. leadership in financial innovation. And the first rescissions package in 3 decades is headed to the president for his signature. We passed measures to end 16 burdensome Biden-era regulations. We passed the Take It Down Act to combat non-consensual explicit images being shared online. And of course, 2 weeks ago, Mr. President, on the 4th of July, the President signed into law the big, beautiful bill to deliver permanent tax relief for the American people to make our country safer, stronger, and more prosperous. And Mr. President, we have additional bills coming down the pike. The Armed Services Committee under Chairman Wicker recently reported the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. And the Appropriations Committee under Chair Collins has reported out 4 bipartisan bills, which we will begin considering this week. I said last year that I was committed to bringing appropriations bills to the floor through regular order, and we are in the process of doing exactly that. Of course, any regular order consideration of appropriation bills is going to require cooperation from Democrats. And this week, we'll get a glimpse of where Democrats are on this issue. It was deeply disappointing to hear the Democrat leader threaten to shut down the government if Republicans dared to pass legislation to trim just 0.1% of the federal budget. But I'm hopeful that that is not the position of the Democrat Party. Time will tell. Mr. President, the Senate has also important work to do to confirm the president's nominees. We started out this year by confirming 21 of the president's cabinet nominees at the fastest pace in more than 2 decades. And we've kept up our focus on getting President Trump's team into place. We've now confirmed 96 civilian nominees, far outpacing where the Senate was at this point in the first Trump administration. And the only reason, frankly, Mr. President, that we're not moving faster is because of Democrats' historic, that is right, historic level of obstruction. Democrats have been forcing cloture votes for every civilian nominee, something that is without precedent. President Trump is the first president on record not to have a single civilian nominee go by unanimous consent or voice vote at this point in his presidency. The first president on record. Think about that, Mr. President. And Democrats are using this strategy even on non-controversial nominees. Almost a quarter of the nominees whose confirmation process Democrats have dragged out actually got more than 60 votes here on the Senate floor. Mr. President, the American people gave President Trump a mandate, and he deserves to have his team in place to execute that mandate for the American people. Democrats can continue to drag this process out, but Republicans are going to get these nominees confirmed.
For his part, Schumer discussed reconciliation, the appropriations process, a nominee to the Third Circuit, and the president's trade policy with China.
Mr. President, today we got the news that the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, confirms Donald Trump's big, ugly betrayal is going to kick at least 10 million Americans off their health insurance and spike our national debt by another $3.4 trillion. In truth, the number of people who will lose health insurance could be much higher, as many as 16 million when you account for the cuts to ACA and other forms of insurance. This finalized independent analysis from the CBO confirms it. Republicans' signature bill is the ultimate betrayal of the American people. It betrays every single family who will lose health insurance. It betrays our financial future. It betrays our children and grandchildren who will pay for these billionaire tax breaks as the debt rises and rises. It betrays every family worried about paying for groceries, the mortgage, the rent, prescription drugs. All are going up because of Donald Trump and his administration. Every price of these is going up. And it betrays every rural community from benefits of good-paying energy jobs. Republicans' supposed signature bill betrays everyone outside of the billionaire class and the special interests. Now Republicans are going to spin the mother of all propaganda jobs to sell this ugly bill to the American people. But today's report reminds us of something. Facts are stubborn, and the facts are clear. The big ugly betrayal is a loser for the country and be a loser for the Republicans. And the Republicans can yak when they go back home. But when people lose their jobs, when people's bills go up, when they're paying more, when they're losing their health insurance, that's reality. And no amount of propaganda, no amount of going home and telling people how great this is will undo the actual damage that will be done to the American people. And we know that they will realize the Republicans have betrayed them. On appropriations. This week, the Senate's expected to take up the first set of appropriation bills for fiscal year 2026. On the substance, a number of the bills negotiated in committee make significant reversal of DOJ's horrible cuts. Of particular importance are the reversals these bills make to DOJ's cuts to veteran programs, which was so vicious and so mean and hurts so many veterans. And it also makes reversals on other important Democratic priorities. We'll see how Republican leaders plan to move forward with these bills and other bipartisan bills on the floor. Yet yesterday, the Republican leader gave an interview where he said he'd like to see more bipartisanship when it comes to appropriations. He said rightly that it takes cooperation from both sides to move things through the Senate in the appropriations bills. But frankly, the Republican leader is talking a bit out of both sides of his mouth. On the one hand, he talks about bipartisanship and wanting to see both parties come up with the appropriations process. On the other, he's putting on the floor rescission packages with cuts demanded by Donald Trump and Russell Vought that retract many of the bipartisan agreements, with the promise by Russell Vought of more to come. When Donald Trump and Russell Vought insist on rescissions, and an obedient Republican Congress goes along, even though many of them know how wrong it is, it makes the spending process totally partisan. So the leader's words and his actions are a complete contradiction. He can't have it both ways. Again, not 1 week ago, Republicans jammed a rescission package through this chamber, axing billions of bipartisan funding to public broadcast and foreign aid, purely on a party line vote. Less than a day later, Russell Vought comes out and says the appropriations process should be, quote, less bipartisan, unquote. Frankly, I don't want to hear Republicans grouse about Democrats if they're going to give people like Russell Vought a free pass to trash the good work that takes place in this chamber. And now, of course, there are reports that Donald Trump and Russell Vought want Congress to greenlight another recessions package in the near future. Then there's Donald Trump's big ugly betrayal, a purely party line vote, a partisan giveaway to billionaires and special interests, paid for with the biggest cuts to health care, food funding, and good-paying energy jobs we've seen in our lifetimes. So Leader Thune says he wants to see bipartisanship. That's all well and good. But Leader Thune can't have it both ways. If Leader Thune wants to talk about bipartisanship, he should focus on keeping his side of the street clean first, because Donald Trump and Russell Vought have made clear they want to continue launching partisan broadsides that will inflict deep harm on the American people, raising costs, unleashing chaos, inviting even deeper corruption, across the federal government. Now on Mr. Bove, Emil Bove. Last week, Senate Republicans on the Judiciary Committee reported out one of Donald Trump's worst judicial nominees yet, Emil Bove, and that's saying a lot because there are so many bad ones. Judiciary Republicans were so afraid to talk about Mr. Bove's nomination that, in fact, the Republican chair cut off debate time and refused to let all Democrats speak. And rather than being part of this farce, Judiciary Democrats, led by my friend, the ranking member, Senator Durbin, rightly walked out of the hearing. I commend my Democratic colleagues for standing up for the integrity of our courts and refusing to participate in a compromised committee process for a deeply compromised nominee. It's obvious why the Republicans were so eager to cut off debate. They know the arguments against Mr. Bove are telling and so unworthy of anyone nominated to a court of appeals or any judicial position in this government. Mr. Bove is the perfect example of the type of person Donald Trump wants on the bench. Political, aggressive, unprofessional, abusive, and ready and willing to put the Trump agenda over the rule of law. We all know what Donald Trump wants from judges, complete obeisance to whatever he wants, regardless of rule of law, regardless of precedent, regardless of the Constitution. And Mr. Bove has a long history of defending Donald Trump when he was his personal attorney. He defended the president when the president was accused of inciting the January 6th insurrection, mishandling classified documents, falsifying business records, and more. Well, what should that do when someone defends a president who's accused of very serious crimes? It should disqualify them for the bench, but the opposite occurs in the Trump administration. His defense of Trump's indefensible actions earned him a top spot at the DOJ, where he used his power to fire prosecutors who were working on criminal cases for the January 6th insurrectionists. That's right. Mr. Bove helped the rioters who assaulted law enforcement officers on January 6th get off without any charges. What is happening to this country? What is happening? And if that's not enough to disqualify him, one whistleblower testified that Mr. Bove repeatedly told DOJ lawyers to ignore court orders and even deliberately mislead judges. Mr. Bove encouraged officials not to tell judges the truth, the same sort of judges he is now nominated to serve alongside. How can someone who has such disregard for our judges and our courts be trusted on the bench? Mr. Bove's nomination previews the dark, ominous plan that Donald Trump and Republicans have for the federal judiciary. They want to fill our courts with partisan operatives who will protect and serve Donald Trump, not protect the rule of law. Experience doesn't matter. Judicial independence doesn't matter. Understanding the law and applying it without fear or favor doesn't matter at all. In fact, there's fear of Donald Trump among so many of the Republican nominees for judge and of so many of our Republican senators. For Donald Trump, the only thing that matters when it comes to judges is unyielding fealty to himself. We have never seen, such a disastrous mandate for our federal courts in all of American history. And if the Republicans proceed, the damage to our judiciary will be irreversible. Mr. Bove's nomination is an insult to every single qualified independent judge who has ever sat on the federal courts. He should never have been nominated. He should never have been reported out of committee, and he should never be confirmed by the Senate to such an important job. Finally, on NVIDIA and China, Donald Trump's trade war has created a mess for U.S. businesses. And now that he's rushing to clean up that mess, and he's getting played by Beijing. Last week, the administration handed President Xi and the Chinese government a major win, approving chipmaker NVIDIA to resume selling American H-20 chips used to develop AI to China. When these chips were blocked, Americans breathed a sigh of relief. China would not get the basic tool to catch up and even surpass us on AI and so many other important technological advances. But not 4 months ago. For that reason, the administration blocked the sale of these chips. But now, typical of Donald Trump, there's no consistency. It's just what he feels is good for himself at the moment. They're making a costly, troubling U-turn. Flip-flops like this show weakness to the Chinese government, and that's the last thing we can afford. What's more, the chips are vital in the race to dominate AI. These H20 chips are among the best on the market and were critical for China's development of DeepSeek. We all wondered, how did China catch up with DeepSeek? Well, by using these chips. And now Donald Trump is greenlighting the sale of even more of these chips. If you're worried about allowing China to dominate in AI with all the troubling prospects of that domination, then this reversal from the administration is a huge step towards enabling that Chinese dominance. Every chip Donald Trump allows NVIDIA to sell to Chinese competitors is one more boost to Beijing in the race for AI dominance. But the administration's capitulation keeps going. As part of trade talks with Beijing, they're also undermining export controls of U.S. technologies deemed to be critical for our national security. This sends an unmistakable message to adversaries around the world. America's national security is open to negotiation under Donald Trump's government. The administration should reverse its original decision in April to block the sale of these chips to the Chinese government. Donald Trump should stop giving the Chinese government leverage in the race for the technologies of the future.
This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast. You can watch live action from Congress on our YouTube channel at FedNet TV.